Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah for Mormons. Today we're going to be talking about Isaiah 44. There's some interesting issues in this chapter. There may be some textual corruption here at the end of the chapter. In fact, I think there is. Chapters 44 and 45 are some of the main reasons that people say, oh, this has to be late. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think most of the chapter works just fine in Isaiah's time, with one or two details maybe being late. So we're going to talk about that. I think this is... When you look at the statistical analysis, actually, we've got some people that have actually done this. You look at the statistical analysis of Isaiah, the language is very interesting. You get chapters 1 through 39-ish is clearly pre-exilic biblical Hebrew. Chapters 56 through 66, clearly post-exilic biblical Hebrew. So pre-exilic is roughly before Lehi's time, post-exilic is roughly after Lehi's time. It's a nice little division for us. But then you get the section we're in right now, 40 through 55, which is like part late, but part early. So what it looks like has happened is, and we talked about this before, somebody has edited this part more heavily than the rest. And so you're going to get strange editorial interpolations. That's just life. And I think that one of them that we get here is related to Cyrus in chapters 44 and 45. One reason people usually date this way late is they say, well, Isaiah can't be talking about the future. I'm actually okay with Isaiah talking about the future. What I'm not really okay with is him talking about something that would make exactly zero sense to anybody. He talks about Cyrus and never bothers to explain who he is. Nobody knows who Cyrus is in Isaiah's time. So to me it seems very likely he's actually talking about Hezekiah, but somebody later has come in and said, oh, this is like what Cyrus did, and so they throw in Cyrus's name. That, I think, just happens sometimes. There actually isn't that much textual corruption in these chapters, I don't think. I think there's a pretty small amount, but someone has thrown in the name of Cyrus, right? Probably. Like I said, Isaiah could have known about this, but if he does know about it, he's not going to talk about it like this. He's going to say, well, someday there's going to be this guy, he's going to be a king, he's going to come from Persia, his name's going to be Cyrus. You're not going to throw him in offhandedly like that. Nobody's going to know what you're talking about. But if later I have a little bit of room as I'm copying, and I think I can, you know what, I'm just going to toss Cyrus's name in here, then that may well have happened. Somebody maybe is updating the language and they're just going to throw Cyrus's name in there, right? I think that may be what we are seeing here. But let's just start here at the beginning and we'll go through it all and we'll get to that a little bit more later. So, in the last verse, in the last chapter, he's been talking about, I gave Israel over to have all these problems because they didn't do the right thing. They were sinning against me. But then he says, yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen. Thus saith the Lord that made thee and formed thee from the womb, which will help thee. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, and thou, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. For I will pour water upon him that is thirsty, and floods upon the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon thy seed, and my blessing upon thine offspring, and they shall spring up as among the grass, as willows by the watercourses. One shall say, I am the Lord's, and another shall call himself by the name of Jacob, and another shall subscribe with his hand unto the Lord, and surname himself by the name of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first, and I am the last, and beside me there is no God. And who as I shall call and shall declare it and set in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people, and the things that are coming and shall come, let them show unto them, let them show unto them. Fear ye not, neither be afraid. Have not I told thee from that time, and have declared it? Ye are even my witnesses. Is there a God beside me? Yea, there is no God, I know not any. So what is he saying here? He says, despite all this, he says, yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen. I think yet is a fine translation there. It's ambiguous, but yet is a fine translation there, based on what he was just saying. He says, yeah, you guys haven't done the right thing, but listen to me now, Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen. You are the people, you're the ones that I have chosen. Thus saith the Lord that made thee. Once again, that's a perfect parallelism, right? Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen. He's using the parallelism to help you understand what he's saying. Thus saith the Lord that made thee and formed thee from the womb. I'm the one that made you and created you not only as a nation, but also as people, which will help thee. I'm here still to help you, despite everything. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, and thou Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. Once again, it's a parallelism. Jeshurun is the old poetic name for Israel. You get that way back in Numbers when you remember the Balaam story, right? Where you get this guy Balaam, he goes around and is supposed to curse Israel, but he ends up blessing Israel. Back in Numbers, he's the one with the talking donkey. In that story, he calls them Jeshurun. It's this old poetic name for Israel. He says, Jacob is my servant, Israel, Jeshurun is the one I've chosen. For I will pour water upon him that is thirsty, or that which is thirsty. This is once again the idea of pouring water on the dry ground, and he says that in the next part of the parallelism, floods upon the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon thy seed and my blessing upon thine offspring. Just like you pour water upon the ground to get things to grow, he's going to put his spirit on Israel and his blessing on their offspring to sort of get them to grow. And that's what he says in the next verse. And they shall spring up as among the grass, as willows by the watercourses. Just like you see grass springing up when the rain happens. And you really get this in an extreme way out there. There are places as you drive down from Jerusalem into the desert where you're driving through the desert and it's just barren wasteland. But then if you drive there after a rainstorm, it's beautiful. It's all green, and you have the little sheep out there eating the green grass. It's amazing to see. So it'll just like that, when you pour water out there on the desert, and it immediately grows up grass. That's what it's saying. It's as willows by the watercourses, like when you get willows growing up along streams of water. I think we've all seen that they grow up very densely, very quickly. As one shall say, I am the Lord's, and another shall call himself by the name of Jacob, and another shall subscribe with his hand unto the Lord, and surname himself by the name of Israel. He says, I'm going to pour my spirit and blessings upon you, and you're going to grow up in righteousness, and you're going to claim me as your God. You're going to say, I'm the Lord's. Another will call himself by the name of Jacob. Another will subscribe with his hand, or subscribe with his hand is like write, like put your seal unto the Lord, and surname himself by the name of Israel. And so these people are going to identify as being the Lord's people because God has poured his spirit on them and they've grown up in righteousness. Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel. And this is interesting. This is during a period when maybe the kingship of Israel has been called into question. Maybe Hezekiah is... people are maybe doubting Hezekiah at this point because well, we know that they were probably, right? Remember the Rabshakeh's speech where he's like, oh, Hezekiah did all this crazy stuff. That, I don't think, is a fake thing. I think what the Rabshakeh is saying is what a lot of people were thinking. And so people are doubting what Hezekiah has done to fix all these problems. And so he says, thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel. As the Lord is the King of Israel. You can maybe doubt Hezekiah, I guess. But remember that I'm the king. It says, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. So, Redeemer, once again, Redeemer can mean like to buy back from slavery. It can also mean like the Avenger of Blood, though. And so the one that sort of carries out sentences against people that have done things they're not supposed to. So that's the other sense of Redeemer, and that may be the sense we're getting here because it's the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. So his Redeemer is Avenger of Blood, the Lord of armies. So this is a very military depiction of the Lord here, Yahweh. It says, I am the first and I am the last, and beside me there is no God. Saying, listen, I'm the only one. I was there at the beginning, I'm going to be there at the end. There is no other God besides me. And he says, and who as I shall call and shall declare it and set it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people. Saying, I am the one that did all this. I'm the one that set everything up. I've set you guys up from the beginning. I'm the only one. What about the future? The things that are coming and shall come? Yeah, okay, let the other gods show them unto them. I'm the only one that knows about the origins of everything. I'm the only one that knows about what's going to happen at the end. But then he says, fear ye not, neither be afraid. Have not I told thee from that time and have declared it? He says, listen, there are no other gods that know this stuff. I'm the only one that knows it. But don't be afraid. I always have prophets that are going to tell you what has happened and what's going to happen. So, implicitly saying, so listen to them. He says, ye are even my witnesses. You know that this has happened. You know that I told you stuff that was going to happen, because Isaiah does, right? Isaiah told them what was going to happen. He says, is there a God beside me? Yea, there is no God. I know not any. There is no other God beside me, he's saying. I'm the only one that can do this. You want to test whether Asher's a god or not? Great, fine. Go look at one of Asher's prophets and say, okay, did you predict this? No, of course they didn't predict it. God's the only one that can. And that's what he's saying here. It says, they that make a graven image, all of them are vanity, and their delectable things shall not profit, and they're their own witnesses. They see not nor know, that they may be ashamed. Who hath formed a god, or molten a graven image that's profitable for nothing? Behold, all his fellows shall be ashamed, and the workmen they are of men. Let them all be gathered together, let them stand up, yea, they shall fear, they shall be ashamed together. The smiths with the tongs both worked in the coals, and fashioned it with hammers, and worked it with the strength of his arms. Yea, he's hungry, and his strength faileth. He drinketh no water, and is faint. The carpenter stretcheth out his rule, he marketh it out with a line, he fitteth it with planes, he marketh it out with the compass, and maketh it after the figure of a man, according to the beauty of a man, that it may remain in the house. He heweth him down cedars, and taketh the cypress and the oak, which he strengtheneth for himself among the trees of the forest. He planteth an ash, and the rain doth nourish it. Then shall it be for a man to burn, for he will take thereof and warm himself. Yea, he kindleth it, and baketh bread. Yea, he maketh a god, and worship it. He maketh it a graven image, and falleth down thereto. He burneth part thereof in the fire, and with part thereof he eateth flesh. He roasteth roast, and is satisfied. Yea, he warmeth himself, and saith, Aha, I am warm, I have seen fire. And the residue thereof he maketh a god. Even his graven image, he falleth down unto it, and worshippeth it, and prayeth unto it, and saith, Deliver me, for thou art my God. They have not known nor understood. For he hath shut their eyes, they can't see, and their hearts that they cannot understand. And none considereth in his heart, neither is there knowledge nor understanding to say, I burned part of it in the fire, and I've baked bread upon the coals thereof, I've roasted flesh and eaten it. And shall I make the residue thereof an abomination? Shall I fall down to the stock of a tree? He feedeth on ashes. A deceived heart hath turned him aside, and he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, Is there not a lie in my right hand? This is one of the funniest parts, actually, I think, of Isaiah, where he just lays into people about idolatry. That's what this whole section is, and I just kind of love it. So let's walk through it here. It says, they that make a graven image, all of them are vanity. When you're making a graven image, a carved idol, he says all of them are vanity. This is kind of ridiculous. They don't really do anything. And once again, he's hitting this over and over again because it's a problem. People have thought that Ashur, the god of the Assyrians, has fought Jehovah to a standstill. So Isaiah has to explain, no, he didn't. Let's talk about how ridiculous these other gods are, right? And that's what he does here. He says they're not even gods. They're worthless. They're vanity. He says they're delectable things. They're these people's idols, the things that they love, their beloved idols, shall not help them. They are not going to profit them. They are their own witnesses. These people actually know that these gods don't see anything or know anything. They should be ashamed of this, because they should know that these gods don't know anything. These gods at the end of the day are going to be totally worthless because, they're made out of like wood, right? He says, who hath formed a god or molten a graven image that is profitable for nothing? As these people are making these graven images, but they're totally worthless. They don't do anything. As all his fellows shall be ashamed. Everybody else that worships idols will be ashamed. The workmen, they are of men. Let them all be gathered together. Let them stand up. They shall fear, they shall be ashamed together. Eventually, these people that have relied on idols are going to look around them and realize that the idols can't do anything. He says, the smith with the tongs both worketh in the coals, and fashioneth it with hammers, and worketh it with the strength of his arms. Yea, he's hungry, and his strength faileth. He drinketh no water, and is faint. The smith just makes it like you would make anything else. There's nothing miraculous that happens here. He just makes idols like anybody makes idols, and he gets hungry like he was making anything. You get hungry and thirsty while you're making this, just like if you made anything. It's just a normal process. Now, in some parts of the ancient Near East, they tried to pretend like it was not a normal process. They would have people make the gods, make the graven images, just like you would make anything else, and then they would kill them, and then say, "Oh, look, see, there's a statue. It just appeared magically, right?" But that Isaiah is making the point that no, you make this like you make anything else. You make this just like you make anything else out of metal, and you get tired and you get thirsty, and it's just a normal thing. It says, "The carpenter stretcheth out his rule, he marketh it out with a line, he fitteth it with planes, he marketh it with the compass, he maketh it after the figure of a man, according to the beauty of a man, that it may remain in the house." And he said, the carpenter makes this like he would make anything else. He gets out his measuring line, and he fits it with the planes, and he marks it with his little compass, his little drawing thing, and makes it look like a man, and makes it look nice enough that you can put it up in the house. I mean, it's just a normal thing. He heweth him down cedars, and taketh the cypress and the oak, which he strengtheneth for himself among the trees of the forest. He's just going out there cutting them down himself, and he actually maybe strengthened them for himself among the trees of the forest. He may have actually helped the trees grow and picked them out himself. He planteth an ash, and the rain doth nourish it, right? There's nothing miraculous about this. He took the plant, he either cultivated the tree or planted the tree himself, and then he goes and cuts it down and he makes something out of it. There's nothing miraculous about this. It says, "Then shall it be for a man to burn. He'll take thereof and warm himself. Yea, he kindleth it and baketh bread. Yea, he maketh a god and worshipeth it. He maketh it a graven image and falleth down thereto." He's showing the absurdity of this. I'm going to cut down this tree, and I'm going to use part of it as wood to make my fire, to make my dinner, and I'm going to turn the rest into a god. Right? It's totally absurd. Right? It's totally absurd. He says, "He burneth part thereof in the fire, and with part thereof he eateth flesh. He roasteth roast, and is satisfied." He uses part of the wood to make his little fire, and he eats dinner, and is happy with himself. He's warming himself by the fire, and says, "Oh, I am warm. I've seen the fire. Oh, look at this nice fire." And with the rest, he makes a god. Right? It's totally crazy. Right? Even his graven image, he falleth down to it, and worshipeth it, and prayeth to it, and saith, "Deliver me, for thou art my God." He's literally cut down the tree himself. He's used part of it to make a fire. And then he's used part of it to make a god, and then thinks the god's going to save him? It just makes no sense, right? And Isaiah is sort of making fun of these guys, lampooning these guys for the absurdity of this. It says, "They have not known nor understood, for he hath shut their eyes, that they cannot see, and their hearts that they cannot understand." Remember, he's done this just recently, going back to Isaiah 6 and talking about this. They have not known or understood, for he hath shut their eyes. Remember, make the heart of this people heavy, and shut their eyes, and shut their ears, and all that. That's what he's talking about here. They are just not understanding this. It says, "And none considereth in his heart, neither is there knowledge nor understanding," to say, they somehow missed the fact that they burned part of it in the fire, and they baked bread on the coals thereof, and they roasted their dinner and ate it. And it says, "And shall I make the residue thereof an abomination? Shall I fall down to the stalk of a tree?" Like, don't you guys get this? You literally make your dinner with part of it, and then you use the other half to make a god? Does that make sense to anyone? And it says an abomination. That's often when it says abomination, it just means idol. So sometimes wickedness and abominations can be wickedness and idolatry, and actually that's confirmed by the way that's used in the Book of Mormon. But he's just talking about how ridiculous this is, right? It's totally absurd. And so he says, "He feedeth on ashes. A deceived heart hath turned him aside." Remember, he says he's cooking on the ashes of this. "A deceived heart hath turned him aside, that he cannot deliver his soul, nor say, Is there not a lie in my right hand?" He says their own hearts are deceiving them and turning them away, that they can't realize, they can't bring themselves out of this, or realize that they're just lying to themselves. And that's the issue here. And then in contrast, we get verse 21. Some people think that this is an interpolation, that somebody just dropped this thing about idols in there. I don't think so. I think it actually flows quite well, because he says, "Listen, I'm the best. I'm the only God. I don't know of any other." And then says, because think about it, idolatry is crazy. And then he says, the rest, which I'll read you here. "Remember these, O Jacob and Israel, for thou art my servant. I have formed thee. Thou art my servant, O Israel. thou shalt not be forgotten of me. I have blotted out as a thick cloud thy transgressions, and as a cloud thy sins. Return unto me, for I have redeemed thee. Sing, O ye heavens, for the Lord hath done it. Shout, ye lower parts of the earth. Break forth into singing, ye mountains, O forest, and every tree therein, for the Lord hath redeemed Jacob, and glorified himself in Israel. Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things, that stretcheth forth the heavens alone, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself, that frustrateth the tokens of the liars, and maketh diviners mad, that turneth wise men backwards, and maketh their knowledge foolish, that confirmeth the word of his servant, and performeth the counsel of his messengers, that saith to Jerusalem, thou shalt be inhabited, to the cities of Judah, ye shall be built, and I will raise up the decayed places thereof, that saith to the deep, be dry, and I'll dry up the rivers, that saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple, thy foundation shall be laid. So what is this? Remember these, O Jacob and Israel, for thou art my servant. So remember all these things I was just talking about with the idolatry, Jacob and Israel. You're my servant, not the servant of these idols. I'm the one that made you. You are my servant, Israel, and you will not be forgotten by me. I'm not going to forget you. Serve me instead of these idols, and I will take care of you. As I've blotted out, like a thick cloud, thy transgressions. Why does he use thick cloud? Because that's what we saw in both the temple and in Mount Sinai, that when God's presence was there, it was like a thick cloud. And he's saying, my presence has blotted out your transgressions, just as a thick cloud sort of blots out my presence so you can't see me, but I blotted out your transgressions, and as a cloud thy sins. Return unto me, for I have redeemed thee. Come back to me. I have redeemed you, or maybe even avenged you, because it was sort of an avenging thing, right? That God kills those 185,000 Assyrians that have come in. We talked about that earlier. It's redeeming them. It's sort of avenging them, what has happened to them that was a problem. But also you can see it as redeeming them. I've bought you out of slavery, and I'm going to bring you back too, which he is going to do. He's talked about that earlier. Sing, O ye heavens, for the Lord hath done it. Shout, ye lower parts of the earth. Now this is the idea of calling the heavens and the earth to witness. Now he has two witnesses, right? This is a common thing in the ancient Near East. Break forth into singing, ye mountains, O forest, and every tree therein, for the Lord hath redeemed Jacob, and glorified himself in Israel. He's calling on the whole world to witness that God has helped Israel. Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb. I am the Lord that maketh all things. Once again, he's saying, I'm the one that made you from the very beginning, from the womb. I'm the Lord that maketh all things. He says, I'm the creator God. I am the best God. I'm the one that made the heavens by myself. I made the earth by myself. And I think, once again, obviously, he doesn't really. In both Genesis and in the book of Moses and the book of Abraham, it's pretty clear that he has others doing this. But it's not like random other gods that are randomly contributing. It's God doing this with the people he's specifically getting to help him, right? That's the idea. That frustrateth the tokens of the liars, and maketh diviners mad. There's these people that are predicting all these things, the diviners that are trying to tell you what's going to happen, they don't know. These people have just been lying to you. I'm going to show you that they've been lying to you. Is that turneth wise men, supposed wise men, backwards. These are people that once again, sort of like the astrologer types, and maketh their knowledge foolish. All these other people that think they can tell the future and stuff, they can't. And I'm going to show you that they can't. Is that confirmeth the word of his servant. So these other guys are completely wrong. It's his servant that's correct. And Isaiah is clearly in his mind here. He says, and performeth the counsel of his messengers, that saith to Jerusalem, thou shalt be inhabited, and to the cities of Judah ye shall be built. I will raise up the decayed places thereof. He's saying, listen, I'm telling you, to my servant and to my messengers, God is saying to his servants and to his messengers, all these things are going to happen, just like I've said. He says to Jerusalem, you will be inhabited. Jerusalem, remember, has had all these problems. It's had probably a big plague. There's all kinds of issues that have happened to Jerusalem. So he's saying, you guys are going to be able to live there as normal. It says to the cities of Judah, you shall be built. Remember, the Assyrians have sacked all these cities. Isaiah is saying they're going to be rebuilt. I'll raise up the decayed places thereof, these places that look like they're just rotting out because they've been just destroyed by the Assyrians. It's okay. God's going to come back. Jerusalem is going to be back to normal. The cities of Judah are going to be back to normal. All these wrecked places are going to be okay. That saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up the rivers. This is, once again, he's getting the Exodus motif here of drying up the deep and letting all the people come back on dry ground, back to Israel, right? And then you get this, that saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd and shall perform all my pleasure. Well, what does that have to do with anything? That has literally nothing to do with what we were just talking about. And once again, is anybody going to know Cyrus's name? Probably not. Probably not. So this is this strange thing where can Isaiah talk about the future? Yeah, sure. But is this how he's going to talk about the future? No, he would have to explain this for it to make any sense. You're not going to talk about the future like this. So I think this is probably an interpolation. It probably should be, that saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up the rivers, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, into the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Right? That actually makes some sense, right? If you just skip that part about Cyrus, it says, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, into the temple thy foundation shall be laid. Because otherwise it says, it saith to the deep, be dry, and I will dry up the rivers. That saith of Cyrus, he's my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, into the temple thy foundation shall be laid. It makes much more sense to say, okay, he's talking about the decayed cities of Judah. They'll be built, I'll raise up the decayed places thereof. That saith to the deep, be dry, and I'll dry up the rivers, to bring all the people back, presumably. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, into the temple thy foundation shall be laid. That all makes perfect sense, right? It's the Cyrus thing that makes less sense. So I think the Cyrus thing's probably an interpolation. It makes actually perfect sense that he's even talking about the temple being built, because remember, Hezekiah had to sell off the temple, right? He had to sell off parts of the temple to kind of get the Assyrians who were maybe sitting on the fence, to get them to actually leave town. So he had to give the Assyrians all this stuff from the temple. So he's saying the temple is going to be rebuilt. Now, probably is going to be refurnished anyway. Thy foundation shall be laid. It's likely that this is a slight interpolation, that originally it was just talking about the temple being fixed up, but then people thought, oh, it's fixing up the temple. It's like rebuilding the temple with Cyrus. So they change it slightly to say, oh, it's thy foundation shall be laid, like you're going to have to rebuild it. But I think we have very small interpolations here. Now, you have to remember, what happened is, later, after the Babylonian captivity, right? So we have the Assyrians, they come in, they don't completely destroy Jerusalem. Later, the Babylonians come in, and they do completely destroy Jerusalem, and they deport everyone. And so, but then this guy Cyrus, the Persian emperor, conquers the Babylonians and says, hey, Judahites, you can all go home. So they all go home, and they rebuild the temple. So I think what has happened is Isaiah is talking about Hezekiah and everybody fixing up all of Judah and everything and fixing up the temple again. But then people said, oh, this is like what happened with Cyrus. So they put him in here, right? And then they change it from just kind of fixing up the temple to, laying the foundation of the temple. Because they're talking about, Cyrus is the one that actually, helped us fix up the temple and rebuild the temple after the Babylonians destroyed it. So this must be talking about him. So they probably have tweaked this very slightly to refer to Cyrus. And I think that's really all we're seeing here. We're going to get more Cyrus next time, but I think that's what we're seeing here. The bulk of this obviously works very well in Isaiah's time, but that last little bit, I think we're dealing with a slight interpolation that they're saying, he's talking about Cyrus here. He's talking about what happened under Cyrus, so we're going to tweak it just a little bit to make it fit that. Even saying, to Jerusalem thou shalt be inhabited, that I wonder how that can be read as like they're going to be happy in their habitations, but it could also be read they're going to actually be inhabited, because after the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem, it was sort of empty. So they're saying, oh, it'll be inhabited again. So once again, there may be some slight editing here to reflect a later time, but it's, like I said, it's slight and not really much of an issue. Like I said, the language is later. A lot of this language is post-exilic language, so we're probably dealing, like I said, with some small edits later on, and that's reflected in the language itself. So we shouldn't be too surprised by this. But like I've said, I think that we're talking about Isaiah having written a lot of this, but that the language was updated and a few things were tweaked later on. So it's not really an issue. That's just the problem that we have with the Bible. I sort of am sad. There's a part in the Book of Mormon where I think it's Moroni says, well, you have Isaiah. I won't bother copying the rest of it down that you don't have already. And I'm like, no, please. Give it to us, right? Because it would have been a much better copy. You wouldn't have had these interpolations. But as it sits, we just have to kind of figure this out and figure out what the additions are, and we just kind of have to deal. And that's what we all do with all of the Bible. It's just life. And it's okay. Like I said, I wish we had that in the Book of Mormon. It would be boring to some people, but of course it would be really, really, really nice for us to really care about Isaiah to be able to have that stuff. But that's life, and we don't have it, and we just do what we can. And this is kind of standard for biblical studies. You got to go through, and you have to figure out, okay, what's late, what's early, and you just kind of make it work. And I think here we've got a few late parts, but a lot of this is early, and we're good on that. Next chapter is pretty funny as far as that goes. He's talking, I think, about some stuff with Cyrus, but it's combined with some other stuff. It's a little weird. And we've gotten, I think, some of that earlier where he's talking about Abraham, but then he's got some other random stuff in there. So we'll keep talking about this and work through the additions, the late additions to the text, and kind of sort out what's going on here. But thanks for being with me today, and we'll see you guys next time.